What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary, and I'm here with my beautiful wife. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm from Turkey. And today we're reviewing The Convert.
Yes, we watched this film last night. This was a pick from AKDI, and we have some fan requests that we're going to get to, so y'all hold your horses. We will get to those films. And if you have any other films you want us to cover, please put them in the comments or the chat, and we will get to them. Now, this is a New Zealand film, and I can honestly say that I really like the cinema that comes out of Australia and New Zealand that I've seen so far. I think about a year ago, my wife and I were in Kenya, and I saw one of my favorite films that I've ever seen. It's called The Drover's Wife. That was an Australian film. And this is a film, from a country very similar to New Zealand with a very similar history. And I can say I honestly liked it. But I think I liked it more than you did, acting. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, I think this movie does great job on certain things. Making the movie very realistic, just how it was lived back then, because this is a historical piece, right? And also, it does have good scenery, for example. It does have good acting and good, character, overall, general good character development or history. But there is some issues that I struggled getting into because it is very slow paced. There were some shots that were cut in the middle that took me out of the story. And sometimes I thought the dialogue was just slow sometimes it was because of translation, because inside the story, there are two languages that are spoken and, they were being translated to one another. So yeah, those things sort of sometimes kept me out of the, journey.
Right. And when she's saying that there were two languages spoken, she's saying that English is spoken by mostly the colonists and some of the natives in New Zealand, because this film takes place in 1830s New Zealand. But then there's the indigenous language that's being spoken, and there's no translation for that most of the time. There are some translations, but it might get frustrating if you're watching this as an English speaker or a person who doesn't speak one of those native languages, and you're like, what's going on? It feels like something important is being said. But I like that because it makes you feel like how the colonists felt or the Europeans felt who didn't try to learn the language. You feel like the outsider, and you feel like you're, in the midst of something greater than yourself because you're in somebody else's land.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind the amounts that they translated from, Maori language to English. It's just the way that it was done was a bit, slow.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just give a little background on this film. So this film is a historical drama from 2023 made by Lee Tamahori. And I think Lee Tamahori could be the equivalent of maybe like a Steven Spielberg or for New Zealand or something like that. He is a very seminal director from his country. He's directed and made a lot of films, one of them considered the greatest film ever from his country, Once Were Warriors. And he's also done some James Bond films and some other action films and stuff like that. But I'm very interested to dive into his catalog because I feel like he's telling a grand narrative about his nation. And I can say I really liked the cinematography, and forget what act he's talking about. The pacing was cool for me. But
Wow.
what did you think of the direction?
I thought the director did a good job. I liked the scenery and some of the nature shots were very cool. I don't think it was exceptional, but I think it was good according to the story. I just had a problem with the editing, and that's the thing. There would be a scene where two people are about to kiss, and then boom, it was cut. And then
Yeah.
it's a completely different scene after that, and there's no fading, no leading. And for me, that was just did they edit this in in iMovie? What is happening? So it felt like one of my videos that I edited.
That's funny. That's funny as hell. I agree with you. I wish that films started using or did use fade between scenes more often. Because like there are times when this film is shot at night with like natural lighting, with like a person writing by a fireplace, and then the next scene is like boom, broad daylight, 12 p.m., sun is shining on like clear blue water, and it is jarring to your eyes, especially if you're watching it in like a dark room. And yeah, when you're talking about like, two people are like kissing and then the scene changes, I think this film adds on to the mystery, right? Because I think you're talking about the scene when like the indigenous boy and the white girl were like kissing in the church, and then we don't see what happens next, right? But I think that lets you like fill in the gaps on what happens next, because there's a lot of mysteries in this story, and things that are left unsaid. And I can admit I was frustrated about some of it, but other times I'm like, okay, I can go along for the ride with this. I don't need everything explained.
Okay, like, yeah, for me, like I said, it was an editing issue. It's not like even about the explaining part. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't upset because I wanted to see them, have intercourse, but I was upset because just like, it took me out of the story,
Mm-hmm.
like
I
that
got you.
style. And I wish, I don't know, like the camera moved to a candle in the church and then it faded away, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. We'll talk more about that. But let's just break down the story. So the film opens up and it says some text like, in the beginning, the Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, they fought with like bladed weapons, or actually like blunt weapons. Like they didn't have swords. They would beat each other with like, I don't know, clubs made out of jade or rock or wood or something like that. And then they moved on to like swords, and then the white man brought guns and Christianity. And then the title says like the year is 1830, right? And they open up with this drone shot over New Zealand. Like there's this small bird flying, and then like a giant hawk scoops it up. It was actually kind of graphic, very CGI-ish. But New Zealand is such a beautiful place. Like Acti said, like when we're watching this film, they show all this mountain and sea, and you're like, damn, like this looks almost like paradise to some degree. I was also thinking like, man, I think a hobbit is going to walk in the background, or like Gandalf is going to pass in the, pass by the camera, because it does remind you of like Lord of the Rings too. But we're introduced to the main character. Basically, it's this guy on a ship that's, rocking in the ocean, and they're in a storm. And after the storm passes, they see that one of the crew members dies, right? So all the crew members on this kind of small ship go on the deck, and they ask the preacher to give a benediction for the person. And he gives like a very good prayer, right? And everybody's sort of like taken aback. It's mostly white guys, but there is one indigenous guy there. And later on that night, the captain of the ship comes down to the hull and talks to the preacher, whose name is Munro. And he is the main character of this film, and he's played by an Australian actor named Guy Pearce. And the captain of the ship says to Munro, like, that was a very good prayer. But he finds that, Munro isn't like studying the Bible. He's actually like reading Adam Smith, who is a thinker and economist who is regarded as the founder of capitalism, right? And, the captain, his name is Hedgley, he's sort of like cagey about the pastor, right? Cause like we see through their conversation that, Hedgley is bringing this pastor along to drop him off at some outpost there, and he's doing a job. And the preacher, sort of shows that he is more than just a preacher, if that makes sense. Like he's drawing, he's reading things outside of the Bible. He's sort of standoffish from the group. Like, what did you think of like the introduction of Monroe and Hedgley and, the whole scenery?
Yeah. First of all, when I saw like the bird, the big bird eating the small bird, it sort of gave me like, okay, the law of the nature sort of vibe. So I was thinking, is this what the movie is going to be about? Is it about law of nature? And then when we're introduced to Monroe, I thought that, okay, well, that's a good looking preacher in 1830s. And he's also like smart.
Yeah, I
Like,
wouldn't trust a preacher like that. He's gonna fuck a parishioner.
Wow. Yeah, like that was just, I felt like that was a bit ahead of his time, to have a preacher like that in the 1830s. I don't know if that was super realistic, but of course it's also a movie, and I liked his character right off the bat. He seemed like a guy who was like just and fair, and
Hmm.
also he looked like he was like battling with something in his head, but he wasn't like talking a lot. Maybe he was getting adjusted to being, in a new place
Hmm.
that he was about to be. So
Hmm.
yeah, he had like this mysterious air about him.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I was kind of interested about where the film was going, right? Because like Christianity is tied to like missionary work. And if you remember that documentary we watched about the girl Renee who went to Africa and did a lot of evil things in the name of Christianity, I forgot the name, Savior Complex, right?
Yeah.
Like I thought the film was going to go down the route of like Monroe goes to the island, brings Christianity and causes chaos and havoc. He starts like a religious war in New Zealand. I didn't know where the film was going. I had no ideas going into it. And so, yeah, later on the deck, right, the preacher, Monroe, is like drawing a picture of the Maori boy, and Hedgley, the captain, comes and tells him, like, you like drawing pictures, eh? That Maori boy over there, he's actually the son of one of the captains on the island, of one of the chiefs on the island. And Hedgley shows his dominance over the Maori and says, hey, you, come here. What's his name? Anuku, something like that, right? Anuku? You remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, he tells like Anuku, hey, come here, boy. And Anuku like gets up and he like tells Anuku, steer left, steer right, sort of like showing that he is in control of the situation. And they pull up on the island, and they say, to Monroe, welcome to paradise, right? And Monroe's like, yeah, yes, paradise, whatever. What a misleading name. Always a misleading name. And then they make it to the island, and the guys are like pulling off in the boat, but Monroe is able to get his white horse to swim to the shore. And Hedgley's surprised by this, and the other people are surprised too, because how is this preacher so badass? And then he has this very cool shot where, Monroe is riding the white horse on the sand beaches of New Zealand. It was hella cool. Any comments about any of those scenes?
Yeah, I think like when we find out that the Maori boy was in the,
Hmm.
like first we see the Mari boy and we know he is like a foreigner to the rest of the crew because he has tattoos like down his chin, right?
Hmm.
So we know he's an indigenous person. And then I was thinking like, what is he? Like, is he a worker? Is he, captured by them?
Hmm.
And then we find out that his father, the chief, actually gave him to these, sailors for
Hmm.
him to be able to, learn how to sail.
Hmm.
And then I was thinking, okay, so maybe there is at least some sort of like transaction between like the colonialists and the natives,
Yeah,
and
like
they're
an
not at
equal
war yet.
cultural exchange.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, definitely like the scene with him, getting out of the sea with his white horse was really cool. And like all
Hmm.
the shots of him riding, that was really cool. Like
Hmm.
he looked very ethereal.
Yeah, yeah. I liked how, they showed this in this film because when I think about like colonialism or other films we've watched about colonialism, usually it's just like the white folks show up and cause havoc, right? Like in a Gide, Wrath of God. But in this film, it's sort of like it paints a picture of not both side. One side is the evil one, and the other side is just the innocent, helpless victim getting dominated. I think the beauty of this film is that it shows the complexities of both sides, right? Human nature exists on both sides. And with that character of the indigenous boy who is on the ship, right, it shows like he might not be fully respected or viewed as human, right? But he is there to like sort of learn from the white man, their ways and stuff like that. And his father had enough insight to say, okay, you're going to go there and learn and pick up stuff from them, right? But the overall tragedy is like we know how the story ends up. Like, like in the as time goes on, like the indigenous people got dominated by this other culture. But it was interesting.
Yeah. No, it was definitely interesting because in this movie you see the most PC. British people who are colonizers. Like,
Yeah.
you know, they're like a community that was sent there, and they're trying to like just have their own little village there, basically,
Hmm.
own little town, and their purpose essentially is not to like raid the natives, but
Hmm.
that's what it comes down to, you know, in the history. At the end, they sort of
Yeah.
take it over through colonialism and capitalism and everything,
Yeah.
which kind of like, you know, that's why I said this movie does a good job to show like the reality of it, at least in this part of the world.
Yeah, because this film is interesting because in 1830, right, there were hundreds of thousands of Maori people there, and maybe only a few hundred or maybe a few thousand, white people there, right? And I heard Lee Tamahori say this, before we started this review. He said, "I wanted to shoot a film when the dominant culture in New Zealand wasn't European, right?" And that's sort of what this film is like. Like the Europeans are showing up sort of like at the mercy of what the natives will do. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
like, I guess they conquer from inside, you know,
Yeah.
not with necessarily, you know, guns and, you know, knives, but it's more like a inside occupation
Yeah.
a little bit.
And we sort of see this, take place at first when, Monroe, after he rides his horse, he takes his horse into like the bushes to eat and feed. And this native girl comes up to him and she is like holding her weapon, but then she sheaths it and walks up to the horse and starts to pet it. And Monroe is like, "It's okay, it's all right, no trouble." You get what I'm saying? But then some indigenous guys come out and they start yelling at Monroe like, "Hey, who the fuck are you?" And so Monroe's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa!" And basically, Hedgley, the captain, comes in and he speaks the native language, and he tells the chief or whoever the man was behind the native girl, like, "My friend here didn't mean any problems. He's just feeding his horse." And he then asks the chief, "Can we get some wood to repair our ship?" And the guy says, "I want your horse for the wood." And Hedgley is like, "You hear this? He wants my friend's horse." And then he instead gives him the axe, and the native man walks away. Right? That was kind of interesting. Kind of interesting. What do you think about that first interaction?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, it was sort of the obvious that they were trying to make, you know, Monroe's character seem like he's this curious but kind guy. Like he
Hmm.
was talking to, what's his name? The other native boy in the ship. And he was
Hmm.
asking like, what does your necklace mean? What does your tattoos mean? And, he was interested. He was taking notes and stuff. So he wanted to learn about this land that he was going to.
Yeah.
And yeah, the interaction between like the captain and the
Hmm.
natives, it was definitely interesting because they weren't like just, you know, putting up their guns and killing them, like you
Hmm.
said, like how we would normally assume it would happen, but
Hmm.
rather the captain was respectful of their traditions. And then like it was also, you know, interesting to see that exchange of goods
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, very interesting. I have to ask you, can you pronounce the name of the girl who played Rangimai? Rangimai. Rangimai is the girl who walks up to the horse, and she becomes a central character of this film. So, Acty, do the honors of pronouncing the actress's name who brought this beautiful character to life.
Okay, well, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but I guess it's Tiorere Nagati, Melbourne,
Tia
also.
Nagati.
Tiorere Nagati, Melbourne.
Okay. Good job. Good job. Excellent. Yeah. Shout out to Tiore Yore. She is going to do a lot more in this film, and I think her character was great. And the guy who plays Uneku, too, is also going to be a central character in this film. But either way, moving forward in the story, right, Monroe is talking to Chanley, like saying, "Thank you for saving my ass back there." And Chanley is like, "I got to get you to Epworth." But Changley is like, "Please, please, just give me like a day or two. I want to study the land and get used to this country if I'm going to be living here and being a preacher." So Chang Li is like, all right, I'll give you like a day or whatever, or something like that. So then Monroe doesn't learn his lesson. He goes back off into the woods and tries to fall asleep under a tree. But then there's a big ass fight that breaks out between one of the tribes. Like, so he runs out to the corner and sees that, the natives are like slaughtering each other, hitting each other with sticks. They're shooting each other with muskets and stuff like that. And, it's really bad. Rangi Mai is holding it down. Like, she's killing a few guys, but basically their tribe is getting overpowered. Monroe tries to jump in there and tries to protect Rangi Mai, but then they get met by the chief tribe leader, who is Akatawara. I hope I pronounced that right. And Akatawara is this big, huge Maori man covered in like this, feathers of an ostrich with tattoos all over his face, holding a musket, right? And he speaks English, right? And he walks up to Monroe and is like, why are you here? And he's like, I'm here on behalf of my kingdom to, teach Christianity or something like that. And Akatawara is like, your king is George, right? And, Monroe says, no, George is dead. And Akatawara is actually shocked because he says, George is dead? That's crazy. I sat at his table. He was my friend. Which was crazy because it kind of showed like how powerful Akatawara was and what the interactions were like between the British and the Maori. Like they flew the man out, shipped the man out, boated the man out to England and stuff like that to sit down with the king himself. And Akatawara is such a powerful force when he's on screen. And basically what happens is like, Monroe is like, I want you to spare two of these people here. And Akatawara is like, one life for one gift. And so he says, I'll share my horse. And so Akatawara kills Rangamai's husband and saves her life, right? And takes Monroe's horse. And then they leave. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was definitely crazy to see that whole tribe chief coming, and he was definitely, like you said, a force in the screen. He was big and mighty, and he had a gun too, which something is a bit ironic because
Mm-hmm.
they fight with swords and spears and stuff like that. And I was thinking when he spoke English and he was talking how he met King George and stuff like that. Like, this man was one of the first delegates in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he spoke multiple languages. He's meeting with with kings of one of the most powerful nations in the world at that
Yeah.
time. Like, this guy was like the first, sort of international delegate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, yeah, that was very interesting that he learned the language and stuff like that, and very plausible also.
Yes.
But yeah, and I guess, I don't know, it was once again sort of an exchange of goods, because
Mm-hmm.
he referred to the girl and the guy as slaves. Oh, you want
Yeah.
slaves? So how are
Yeah.
you going to pay for them?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, it was interesting to see that interaction.
Yeah, Akatawara said like one of the funniest threats to Rangimai. After he killed Rangimai's husband, he tells Rangimai, go with them or I will eat you. It was kind of funny. Another thing, I think, this film is good at telling the story, but it can also be problematic because like the fight scene between the natives, it can play into the narrative that, white supremacists say like, oh, when we showed up, the natives were like killing each other already, and we didn't do anything different than they were doing to each other. And I feel like this film could be like bait for people to absolve themselves of like white guilt, especially if they're like from New Zealand. Now, I'm no expert on New Zealand culture, but in America, we did the same thing, right? The white supremacists showed up, slaughtered all the natives, but then they made excuses for it years later. Like, oh, we showed up, they were eating each other, killing each other, and, it was no difference, right? So this film walks a very fine line, and I feel like, that has to be said about what happens next in the story, but particularly with this scene too.
Yeah, I agree, because that was sort of the nature of that time.
Hmm.
Even in Europe, countries were fighting against each other.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, a tribe from Africa can just come to Europe and take over the land because they are fighting, and then say, oh, but they were already fighting each other, so we
Right.
just
Right.
took over France.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense just
Right.
because people there are doing what they're doing, living by their traditions. Obviously, they're fighting for survival as well, because
Yeah.
it's like whoever has the most goods has the more power.
Yeah.
So, like, to use that as an excuse is kind of like silly,
Yeah.
because it's just like how it is at that time.
Exactly. Exactly. So after that, basically Rangi Mai is brought onto the ship. Monroe is trying to take care of her, but she is like, scratching herself and cutting herself, in a grieving ceremony or grieving process that is traditional to her. And so the captain, Changley, and Monroe and all of the crew, they get on their ship and they run the hell to Epworth. They drop Monroe off at Epworth, and Changley leaves. He says, good luck, Monroe, on converting the people to Jesus or keeping their faith alive, blah, blah, blah. And Rangi Mai is left with Monroe, right? She doesn't speak any English at all, by the way. And so, yeah, basically, Epworth, the leaders of Epworth meet Monroe and they say, welcome, sir. They have a big dinner. And at the dinner, the local people tell him, like, we're paying rent to live here on this land. We pay a local chieftain, but we're worried because, like, there's this warlord in the west or somewhere in the country who is terrorizing the land, and he wants to control all of the territory. And Monroe says, "Are you talking about Akatawada?" And the people are like, "Yes." And he's like, "Yeah, that's my homie. I just met him yesterday." And the people are like, God, he is a savage, isn't he? And so basically they're kind of shook about that. And, yeah, Monroe is also saying, can one of the doctors here, like, help my, indigenous girl, Rangi Mai, because she's cut and bruised and I think it might be infected. And the people are like, it's against our laws to help the natives. They're only allowed to help the white folks who are settled here. Just like you, Monroe, are only supposed to be preaching gospel to the local people, the white people, not the natives, right? What did you think about any of those things?
I was definitely expecting Epworth to be like a bigger city,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't. And it's like just basically a couple of houses, maybe like 100 people in like a small gathering, and there are only
Mm-hmm.
like a couple of houses and stuff like that. So that was interesting,
Yeah.
that they would like bring a preacher there and basically like, setting up their community. And I think what like these scenes does so well, and I have to applaud like Tiore Ngati Melbourne, because I think she like portrayed, loss so well.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think she was a bit worried about what's going to happen to her, because she didn't
Mm-hmm.
know any of these people.
Yeah.
And she was far away from her tribe, and she just lost like her tribe and her husband.
Yeah.
So I think the acting was like just excellent on her part in this, time.
Mm-hmm.
And about the dinner scene, yeah, we just see like good old racism, the beginnings of, not that these people were killing the natives or anything. They were just living there, but they were racist against them, even though
Yeah.
they were doing business with them.
Yeah.
Like, they know that they are capable of doing business and whatever, but they still won't, like, help them if medical help is needed and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
they still are selfish and want everything for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, later on in this film, we're going to see Monroe in a different type of setting, living with the natives, right? And what I find interesting about the two sides that Monroe lives in, when he lives with the white folks, they're acting this way, is that they don't sort of make any attempt to get to know the natives. In fact, they exile the people who are closest to the natives and have the better understanding of the culture. Meanwhile, the native people are trying to do as much as they can to adopt the white man's ways and language while also retaining their culture. But the British, on the other hand, are doing everything they can to make Epworth look just like Cornwall or London or Birmingham, whatever, right? Like, they're building the same sort of houses, having the same sort of customs and stuff like that. And there's no attempt to sort of like learn the language. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it's very interesting how, how that causes people to react differently, because a lot of racism is just ignorance. But the thing is, with the British, they were being purposefully ignorant because they were arrogant. They felt like they were better than the natives, and it's not worth learning. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think the reason, and this is, I'm gonna say like this is for all the, sort of tribes that were approached by the British or any other like colonialist power. I
Hmm.
think one of the biggest like thing that they were sort of scared of them, but also like wanted to be like them was because of the sail ships. Because most of the tribes had like smaller, like canoe, like, ships to go out and fish and things like that. And when they see like a bunch of guys coming in like these big ships, and I would assume maybe also in their belief that sea and the ocean is something like a god, and it's something strong and scary as well. So, if a man could tame the sea like this and build something like that, then they are, somewhat advanced in terms of at least like, technology in that part. So I think that's why the sort of, respect and the want for integration comes from, at least
Hmm.
like with Mari.
Okay, okay. Look at Acty doing some social science right here. Social historical science.
I mean, that's my thought because that invention changed the world.
True, true. But the thing is, like, the people of Oceania, like, they were sailing around everywhere. Like, they made it to Hawaii with them small ass boats. They made it to Polynesia, Philippines, New Zealand, Australia with them small ass boats. So, on one hand, yeah, maybe they did see the big boats and say, whoa, cool. But then they probably also said, bro, why are you overdoing it? All you need is like 17 coconuts and we can make it to Chile and back.
Wow.
You get what I'm saying?
Maybe.
So,
I mean, that plus the guns, I guess.
yeah, yeah. But either way, the point I was just trying to make is like, in the white world, in the British village, Epworth, they're isolated from the rest of society, and they isolate the people that know the culture as well. But after the dinner, right, one of the girls who was sitting there comes up to Monroe and is like, I know somebody who can help you, because our local doctor can't. So Monroe goes to this woman named Charlotte, who is sort of like living exiled in Epworth, like outside of the town, and she's like a woman who helps people give birth, and plus she knows local medicine, culture, customs, and the language. And so Monroe's like, "Can you please help me?" And she's like, "Maybe." Slams the door in his face, but then she like knocks on the door later and says, "I'm here to help." And so she like gives some medicine to Ramanui, right? What was her name? Ramanangi?
Yeah.
Rangimai?
Yeah,
Rangimai.
Rangimai.
Sorry. She gives like some medicine to Rangimai and prays over her, and then tells Monroe, like, give her this. It's called Waka Waka. A.
Wow. It was Kawa Kawa.
Kawa Kawa, whatever. I'm sorry. This is the most culturally insensitive review for the convert you'll ever find. Uh, anyway, he gives her some kawa kawa, or he tells her to give him some kawa kawa, and then Charlotte leaves, right? And yeah, what did you think about that scene? Like Charlotte, her character, everything like that.
I was curious about Charlotte's character because, like, why wasn't she at the dinner table? And yeah, like she was exiled, but obviously we don't know why.
Hmm.
And it was like interesting that, she knew the language and then she did like this sort of prayer over Rangimai. And yeah, it was interesting. I did though, however, get the foreshadowing that she might be the love interest because it
Mm,
was sort of like obvious, oh, like the same age, someone who's also invested in the culture of Maui. So it was sort of like a bit like obvious.
I didn't see that. I totally disagree. I was not expecting Charlotte and Monroe to hook up, right? Because, I thought it was going to be Pocahontas and John Smith. I thought it was gonna be Monroe and Rangimai, banging in a teepee later. Cause that's how these stories go. Like, that's, that's how it always is. And like Last Samurai, Tom Cruise shows up and bangs like the hottest Japanese samurai wife, whatever. Stuff like that, I thought it was gonna be Pocahontas.
And that's what I thought at first too, but after Charlotte showed up, I was like, oh no, it's gonna be Charlotte and him.
Rangimai is hotter than Charlotte.
She is. I
Yeah.
mean, she's younger too, though.
Yeah, yeah. Charlotte seen a lot of BMC. She got a lot of big Maori cock. So I don't think
Okay.
she I don't think she could deal with Monroe and his peckerwood.
Wow. Okay, wow. Well, I don't know what to say to that, but you have to remember Monroe probably didn't have sex for years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we think. I mean, he is a hot preacher, right?
Yeah. He's still a preacher.
Yeah, those are the worst. Those are the worst. Guys with a lot of authority vested in God in them, charismatic, young, handsome, grizzled.
Wow.
Yeah, he's got a lot of cooch. He's got a lot of cooch on his soul. Uh,
Okay.
anyway, so the next day, Rangi Mai is healing. She thanks Charlotte, and Monroe goes outside to like drink his coffee, but then he hears the bells ringing, right? And the villagers are all scared because these Maori men are marching up in like military units with their spears and everything like that. And the leader is dressed in, a long coat, just like Akatawada, but it isn't Akatawada. It's actually Rangi Mai's father. And Rangi Mai comes up with Charlotte, and she is like, yelling at her father, but also in like a singing tone, saying like, who will avenge me? Who will avenge my husband who got killed? Where are the heads of the killers of my husband? And so 3 men are laid down in front of Rangimai, and the father is like, tell me who's who. And she's like, who killed him? And she's like, nope, nope, nope. But then all 3 of them get killed anyway. They got their heads bashed in. And so, Rangimai is then told by her father that you will stay with the white people to learn their ways and everything like that. Plus, you being here is me sort of like stamping this village as a part of my power and everything like that. And, all the villagers are sort of like looking in shock, especially Monroe, because he's like, hasn't seen anything like this before. But, any comments about those scenes?
Very interesting. I love the chanting that,
Mm-hmm.
Rangi Mai does. And it was very like, different and unique. But when she started like yelling at him and all the tribe, I was like, somebody get revenge. Like she was going hard. She was like, screaming from her chest. And it was definitely very like a strong scene.
Hey, would you ask for my killer's head like that?
Of course, yeah. I'm gonna go out on them and be like, chop their heads. Where is my husband's killer?
That was actually kind of hard. I really like how in this film they make the indigenous people seem so regal, royal, powerful, organized. Because I swear, in like every other film that we see, like even Apocalypto, right? Like they make the natives seem sort of like scattered, unorganized, like guerrilla fighters, stuff like that. But here they make them seem like real organized soldiers with a culture, with a code, with ethics. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, and definitely, even like, that's what I was gonna say, like the killing scene, the way they kill, so they have this like weapon, like a paddle. It looks
Mm-hmm.
like a small paddle,
Mm-hmm.
or it's like a weird knife. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
sharp at the end, it's round, but they kill it with the side, I guess because it's thinned out,
Mm-hmm.
like really sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And like the way they kill the people is like in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
But hit through, I think they're hitting like a certain vein, and then the
Yeah.
person is dead just then. So that's
No,
like the most humane way to kill someone.
it's not humane, bro. These people get their brains smashed in, like their skulls cracked open, like coconuts, bro. They use that same thing to like break a mango seed. Like, what are you talking about? Those
But
things
it's
are
like so
vicious.
fast that they don't feel, it's like fast so they don't feel pain.
No, man, those Maori weapons are horrible ways to die. They look like they would like be extremely painful. Imagine getting like the worst smack on the back of the head.
No, I mean, I was imagining like how they kill cows and shit,
Uh-huh.
like according to the, religion in Turkey, for example,
Yeah.
and they want to make it like the least painful way.
Hmm.
I felt like it was like that.
I
Like
got you.
obviously it's always so bad to die, like and be killed by a stroke to your throat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt like they were doing it fast so that they don't feel pain. And if one of them was the killer of, Rangi Mai's husband, I thought they
Mhm.
were going to torture him. But because
Yeah.
none of them were, they just killed them.
Yeah. It was it was interesting because in this film, like death is so integral to the story. Like there are certain parts of this film where the story will not go forward unless somebody dies, right? And also there are people that are killed while this war is going on, and it's woven into the fabric of life, right? And I find that so fascinating, right? How you know there's this constant battle going on between the natives amongst themselves, but also battles and forces of nature that take life from the people in Epworth as well. And it's just the show goes on. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, there's constant like survival battle.
Yeah, this battle for survival. But anyway, so Rangimai is left in the village, but her father also leaves her one of his warriors as his guardian, right? And so Monroe is like at the church, like preaching and stuff like that. And he's walking around with his two natives, Rangimai and her like bodyguard and stuff like that. He goes to like the store, and one of the the store owner, I think, is like very Jewish. I'm sorry. He's like always thinking about his coins and his money, and he's complaining, and he doesn't go to church because he doesn't believe in their God, as he says. But he turns out just to be Catholic, but he really hates it in New Zealand, and he wants to go back to England, but he's also hella racist too. We're surrounded by savages, cannibals and stuff like that. And, yeah, Monroe is trying to like, continue preaching to the people. But, while he's at church, one of the elders in the town notices his daughter is eyeing the young, handsome Maori bodyguard for Rangimai. And so then he comes up to Monroe and he's like, you're here to preach to us and keep the natives out of it because certain things are too big of a cultural difference to be bridged and stuff like that. So Monroe is like seeing all the racism that's in this town towards the Maori people and how the villagers sort of don't want to embrace the natives, from my perspective. But what did you think about that?
Yeah. I thought like I liked the character of the helper boy. His name
Hmm.
was Pahirua.
Hmm.
And that was very interesting, like how they were eyeing with the girl together. Very cute, very
Hmm.
demure,
Hmm.
very cutesy, and it was just like young love.
Hmm.
But obviously, like it was not welcomed by her father.
Yeah.
And one interesting scene here also was that like the church scene that happened
Yeah.
before they went to the store.
Yeah.
And in the church scene, like before they're expecting, all the people to come in, Pahirua is looking at the Bible and
Yeah.
he's looking at the pictures of, Jesus and Mary and all of those things. And I guess what I was thinking at that point is like, you know, Monroe is not forcing anything to them, really,
Hmm.
religious wise. We never see him talk about religion to them.
Hmm.
And, but Pahirua is interested
Hmm.
about what this whole thing is. And then like the people come and they sing a hymn together.
Hmm.
And first of all, I was thinking, okay, so he came all this way to freaking New Zealand to sing a hymn. That's like kind of silly and childish. But anyway, and then like they
But
are,
can I
watching.
let me jump in though, because a pastor's job at that time, and sometimes even still now, is to be a lot of things to a lot of people. He's the person that organizes a funeral. He's the person that does weddings. He's your therapist. He's the, possibly like the secret father to your child that doesn't look like you. Like the pastor plays like an important role in the community.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But that's just like whole gathering, at least for me, it sounded like a bit simple. But I understand like, the effect that it has. over
Hmm.
people. And anyway, yeah, I thought that was just very interesting for like the locals to see how the other religion works. And
Yeah.
I was trying to think like what they were thinking about it, you know? It
Yeah, it
probably is
was.
weird.
Yeah, it was obvious that the young boy, the young Maori boy, was interested in Christianity, and I still didn't know where the film was going. So I thought the film was going to be about the struggle of this young boy trying to convert to Christianity, but the racists in the town sort of turn against him, or they reject him for being a Christian, which is very similar to like what happened in America, like during slavery. Like in the beginning, the white folks did not want to make black people Christian because it was against the Bible's rules or the church's rules to enslave other Christians. But over time, they were like, we have to convert them to Christianity to make them more like us and less like themselves so that they are more under our thumb. And so I was so, fascinated about what the story was trying to tell by calling the movie The Convert, have the main guy be a preacher. He likes the indigenous people, but the villagers, hate him, stuff like that.
Hmm.
I was wondering where it was going.
Yeah, definitely. I was also expecting that point in the movie where he's gonna be like converting all of the people who are natives there into Christianity.
Yeah,
But about like the market scene, the only thought I had then was like British government at that time was also like so cruel to their own citizens as well. Like
yeah,
just sending families out to nowhere where they could be, attacked by, tribes because they don't know what is there.
yeah.
Like there could be anything. There could be animals or just the tribes might not be welcoming, and like he was one of those guys that was saying like, I was basically like exiled here, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, the thing is that we'll find out later. Like Charlotte, for example, the way she ended up in New Zealand was that she got convicted of like stealing flour in London or whatever, and so they shipped her to New Zealand. Like that's how the white folks, the early settlers of Australia and New Zealand got there, and America as well. Britain and many other European nations were just basically sending their trash, their prisoners, their rapists, their murderers, their thieves, all to the colonies. And so, yeah, it is kind of cruel. It is very cruel.
Yeah. And also crazy to start a nation there.
Yeah.
Like
Well, it
we're going to start
wasn't
a nation with criminals.
right. Well, you got to be savage if you're going to take other people's land and exterminate their people and rape their women and stuff like that. But there are some scenes here, that I felt like could have been cut out or that were unnecessary. Like there's a scene of like Charlotte and Rangi Mai like playing in the woods, like dancing and stuff like that, and other stuff too. Like I just felt like this film goes overboard on trying to show like, hey, there were some good white people too. Hey, not all the natives were just like subjugated. You get what I'm saying?
I actually like that scene
Mm,
because it's like Rangimai sees a poster for a dance. She doesn't know what it is, obviously. But Monroe says dance. It's like this. And then like he imitates dancing very badly.
mm,
And yeah, later Charlotte shows her at the same time, the people in the village, the men in the village are coming to warn Monroe about like spreading, with the natives basically. And at the same time Charlotte is like, sharing something dear with Rangimai. So it was that like I think it was showing like it's a choice, you can
right.
choose to be like with these people and not like lose your culture. It felt like later on, like how Charlotte was teaching Rangimai her British ways. It did
Mm,
sort of felt like whitewashing a little bit.
mm.
But that first scene, dancing scene was cute. Like they were having fun. And it was like the first time we saw Rangimai happy.
I got you. I got you. I mean, that does make sense now because later on when Monroe and Rangimai go to the club, like she automatically knows how to like dance the white man's dance.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense now because like Charlotte was probably teaching her for like a good 2 hours how to do it in the woods or whatever. But it was also interesting how quick Rangi Mai learned English. Like she was conjugating verbs perfectly. She was like, he wishes. I was like, I wish my students could learn English in like 3 scenes. Jesus Christ. I'm like, she is over here saying, "I would like some flour," in good pronunciation. I was like, "Go Rangi Mai."
Yeah, it was good pronunciation.
Yeah. But yes, she's learning, all sorts of stuff, English, how to interact with white people and stuff like that, and how to dance and the culture. And so one night, the young girl who is the daughter of the chief, the white man's chief, right, is going to the church, and she finds the native boy who is the guard for Rangi Mai there, and they have like an intimate moment. We don't see them have sex or anything like that, but they're like sensually touching each other in their hands and their chests and stuff like that, right? And then also later on, Monroe and Rangi Mai, they get dressed up and they go to the club where all the white folks are like dancing and stuff like that. So they're like, they all start partying and stuff like that. And I wouldn't trust a preacher that came to the club. So I can get why the elders of the village were looking at Monroe crazy. They were like, shouldn't you be reading the Bible instead of turning up and twerking like us? But,
It was not twerking. It was like a weird dance.
yeah, it was this weird sort of line dance. Like, thank God for African American culture. If we didn't exist, this is what the whole world will be doing is dance.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Anyway, but at the same time, when Rangi Mai and like Monroe are like turning up at the party, getting nasty, yeah. The elders of the village are like whispering to each other, and then they find later, after they leave the party, that the guard is dead. Rangi Mai's guard is left dead in the church with a bloody head. He got beat in the back of the head. And Monroe goes back into the party and is like, why did y'all kill that boy? Why did you do that? And they're like, what are you talking about? We know of no such thing. What did you think about when, the boy was killed?
I was very sad because I liked his character a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just like this cute, very young boy. But yeah, like, it was very annoying because I knew that there wouldn't be justice for what happened.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, like, they were talking with Monroe at that scene. They were like, oh, we don't know what happened. It might have been like some intruder. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
intruder?
Mm-hmm.
You're in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, it was very sad.
Yeah.
And it also kind of, goes to show how far the racism would go even within this, quote unquote civilized village.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like, the lengths white men will go to stop their daughters from fucking something not white. Like, it was insane. Like yeah, I did not expect the boy to die. I really thought he was going to be a part of the story and a plot point, but I like how this film, introduces characters and they do have to leave, right? Like, you never know who's going to die next because people are introduced and then they're killed within the story, which puts you on edge. Like, who's next? Like, halfway through the film, I thought Monroe was going to die because that's how much tension is sort of built and shows how little life is valued on this, on the screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't see him dying as well. I'll be honest.
Yeah, yeah. So, Charlotte and Rangi Mai are like preparing the dead body, and the young girl, who possibly the young boy slept with, pulls up on a big black horse. I think there's a metaphor there. She comes, she comes up and she, mourns the dead boy who got killed as well, and then Rangi Mai, Charlotte, and Monroe go and take the boy's body to the tribe. But before they do, the elders of the village of Epworth come to Monroe and says, we apprehended the person who killed the young boy. And he goes there and he sees that they beat up the shop owner. They beat up the shop owner and he confessed to the killing, right? And Monroe sees through this because he knows that the shop owner was competing for business with the other guys in town who were trying to build a bigger business. So they probably just framed him for the murder to get him out of the way. And now they're going to ship him off to Australia. And Monroe's like, you know what? I'm done with this shit. I'm done with y'all. Y'all are savages. You said the savages were outside, but it seems like they're here. So then Monroe and Charlotte and Rangi Mai leave the village with the body of the dead boy to take it back to her father's tribe. What did you think about any of those scenes?
Yeah, I think Monroe like defines it so well because this was such a savage thing to do. Like
Hmm.
kill an innocent person because of love, because
Hmm.
who he loved, and then on top of it frame it on another innocent person. So
Hmm.
like nobody gets fair, treatment here. And I felt sad for like the shop owner. Like I know he was racist and stuff, but nobody deserves to die like for
Hmm.
a crime that they didn't commit.
Hmm.
And also like so were the other elders in the village. They were racist too.
Yeah.
And it was really sad. And I really liked the fact that, basically the elders told Monroe, like, tell the chief that we got the person who killed the help
Hmm.
and that tell them so like we won't have repercussions.
Hmm.
And Monroe is like, no, I'm not going to tell him a lie and
Hmm.
you're going to go down basically. And I like the fact that, they got like squeezed into the corner because of what they did.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because Monroe sort of turns his back on the only civilization he knows, and when he makes it to the new village where Rangi Mai comes from, it's sort of like a big culture shock. Like for us watching on the screen, when they pull up to the village, like the natives are like doing a dance. And they're also like crying and screaming, but it also seems sort of like ritualistic and organized. And they take the dead body and like bring it inside and stuff like that and lay it down on a mat and like in front of like statues and stuff like that. And we see, how the natives live, right? And they're sort of like living in like a fortified area, sort of like their version of like a castle or a fortress, because they're trying to protect themselves from Akatawara's attacks. But even still, their civilization is very, very, very jarring and different when you see it on screen, but it makes sense and it makes it look like actually attractive, if that makes sense. When we see Rangi Mai's village, her tribe. What did you think about that when Monroe made it there?
Yeah, it was definitely very interesting, like how they showed the gate, for
Hmm.
example, because the gate was like this carve up red, like, symbols, sort of
Hmm.
like a, gate. And it was like very beautiful. And how they sort of all chant together and all of that was very beautiful, I thought, and
Hmm.
also very unique. And I liked that they showed that. And I also liked, yeah, Monroe was sort of like surprised about what was going on around him, but he wasn't like, no, 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 don't do this, like let's pray to Jesus. Like he wasn't trying to like actually convert them.
Yeah, yeah,
And I really like the fact that he was sort of just embracing and respecting the whole like culture. And
yeah.
even like when they were about to show the meeting that they were have, I don't know if you noticed, but there was like a statue hanging in the middle, and it was a
Mm.
statue of a man with a big belly and a big dick.
I didn't see that. No, I didn't see that.
And it was like a carved out of wood.
Yeah, yeah, no, so many interesting little tidbits in this film. Like, this is one of the few films I would watch again because I like the story and there's little things that are done that make the culture seem so real, authentic, and alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
And
yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
before that, they also had a scene where they sort of like lay somewhere for the night
Hmm.
before they go into the village, and there's a conversation between Charlotte and Monroe where
Hmm.
we learn Charlotte's husband was one of the tribemen.
Hmm.
So we sort of skipped over that, but were you expecting that?
Um, no, I did not expect that. I sort of thought she was like an anthropologist or a girl who, was very interested in culture or language. But her story is actually interesting. How she got there to New Zealand, how she got, sort of used and abused by both sides, the Maoris and also the white people as well. It's interesting. It was interesting.
Yeah, because we learned that, her husband was one of the tribemen, but then he died during the war. And after he died, they sort of exiled her. And then she
Yes.
was sort of like left between two sides. But
Well,
yeah.
let's take it a step back. So Charlotte, she came from England when she was like poor, and she got caught robbing flower. So they shipped her on a boat to New Zealand with a bunch of other criminals, but the people on the boat mutinied and they overthrew the captors, but they killed like all the men and then raped all the women. And then when they made it to New Zealand, the mutineers basically met a whole village of native people and like slaughtered them too. And so, they were then attacked by the larger tribe, and Charlotte, saved one of the native people who was about to get killed by her rapist. And so that's why she got taken in by the tribe, because they saw her as somebody that they could, that's not working with the white people, right? And so yeah, her husband was a soldier, but then he got killed and then she was excommunicated, right? So she was kind of like used and abused on all sides. So yeah.
Yeah. And also there, Monroe, I'm sorry if I'm going into too much detail, but
Go ahead.
Monroe was like asking the word meaning pakeha. And it's basically like how Charlotte explains, it's a term used for white people.
Yeah.
And she says that, it might mean like a whale catcher, or it's like resembles what white people call each other, or it also might mean like a slang word, like bugger you or something.
Right.
And it sort of reminded me of Muzungu.
Yeah, I mean, almost everywhere in the world, there's like an indigenous word for like white people, right?
Yeah.
And I think in the oceanic countries like Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, the natives, they created sort of like possibly the only slur words for white people, meaning like they have negative connotations. And I think Pākehā is still a word that's used in New Zealand that refers to the white people, and it can sort of be used as a type of derision, like you don't belong here, you're a foreigner and stuff like that. And yeah, I find that interesting too. A lot of things in this film can illuminate you on certain parts of New Zealand culture that you didn't know before. And it's interesting watching this as an outsider, as an American, and I'm sure for you as a Turkish person.
Yeah, definitely. There is a lot of like culture that's portrayed here.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, Monroe is like living with the villagers, and he has a meeting the first night with Ramit, I forgot her name again, Rangimai's father, and also like the other village captain, I guess co-captain or whatever. And they say to, Monroe, like, we trust you, because you saved our daughter's life and stuff like that. And, he asks Monroe, what should we do about the villagers who killed my soldier? And Monroe says, like, just raise their rent or something like that, right? Which I find interesting, because if it was Akatawada who killed one of his soldiers, he would have gone to war. Like, let's kill as many Akatawada soldiers. But when the white people kill one of your soldiers, let's just raise the rent. You get what I'm saying? I didn't think that was just or fair. But I don't know. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it just, to me, it felt like Monroe was trying to avoid death or harm
Hmm.
in any way. Because also,
Yeah.
like, when, this tribe, Maya
Hmm.
Nui, came to the village, and they gave Rangimai to Monroe and things like that. When they killed the people there as well, Monroe tried to intervene as well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
whenever there's death around him, he tries to intervene and make it not happen. And I
Hmm.
felt like that was one of these moments. Like, instead of you know pointing at someone that they could kill, he just said, like, take more money.
Yeah, well, he is a capitalist, right? He was reading Adam Smith on the boat. So yeah, he is, that's interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it, right? He tries to prevent death, and maybe he views like economics as punishment. Like he's all about like sanctions and, and prohibitive pricing. I guess
Yeah,
so.
the only thing, like, I was thinking is that money or resources are important to the British.
Yeah.
That is a threat to the British, and that
Yeah.
is a punishment for them. But I don't think it's a gain for Mai. Like, these people don't use money.
Well,
They
they do
probably
have,
give them like some food or maybe guns or something, which makes it even worse. Like, you
right.
know.
Well, I think every society has something used as currency or money, right? But it might not be physical paper dollars or coins, right? But something has value that you exchange that everybody agrees on,
Yeah,
right?
but I just felt like sort of death and fighting and survival is in a higher place for these tribes than food or, resources like wood or things like that, because they can already get that from, where they're living.
Yeah, yeah. But speaking of death, basically one day, Monroe is hanging out in the village, writing in his journal, drawing pictures and stuff like that. And then he gets a call to like go and meet up with Rangi Mai, because I guess he hears like gunshots or something in the distance. So he goes and sees where the gunshot sounds are coming from. And one of the chiefs of the village tells his boy, hey, go pick up that book that the white man was drawing in or writing in. And so he looks through the book and he sees all these pictures of death, war, carnage, people getting hanged, killed. And he's like, oh, what the fuck is happening here? And meanwhile, Monroe is hanging out with Rangi Mai and he's like, wow, y'all got muskets and rifles and stuff like that, because Rangi Mai's tribe is like practicing shooting. And he's like, how did these weapons get out here? And so he picks up one of the guns and he's like, there's a faster way to reload. And he starts shooting it and he starts, doing bullseyes on the coconuts. And when I was watching this, I was like, okay, somebody's got to explain, how is Monroe so badass? Like he is like James Bond out here, like making his horse swim across the sea. He's a perfect shot with the rifle. I didn't know where it was going until the next scene, like later that night. The chief tells Monroe, come inside, we gotta talk to you. And so the chief says, you're hiding something. And Monroe's like, I don't know what I'm hiding, with Charlotte as the translator. What are you talking about? And then the chief opens up the book and says, what are these pictures? What are they about? And then we find out that Monroe used to be a British colonial soldier. And one time he was doing a raid and he couldn't see who he was fighting. So he went in there with all of his soldiers and they were slashing, stabbing, shooting everything they saw and heard. And when the smoke cleared, he realized he had killed a bunch of children and women, and he starts crying. And the chief says to him, I've killed women and children before too, and I don't cry like a little bitch, but we feel you. That's
Wow.
essentially that's what the chief said. He said, I killed women and children before and I'm cool. Why you crying, ho? But anyway, they said, Monroe, you good. Just get your sissy ass out of my tent and stop crying. But what did you think about that scene or any of those scenes?
Oh God, yeah. The shooting range scene, that was definitely interesting because just the view of like, these indigenous people with their clothes and their tattoos to be like shooting rifles, it just looks, a bit funny. And then when he's teaching them, I just felt like, okay, there's like a bonding moment here, but should it be over guns? I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, I also definitely thought like he was cool and stuff. And with the scene in the tent, see, like, this is an important scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
We sort of like hearing about Monroe's past, and we're connecting the dots here, why he is the way he is, right? And to me, like, there was translation here, and it just was like, there's a couple of words and then I have to wait like 30 seconds for the translation. And then there are more words and it's realistic, right? But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I'm like waiting a 10 sentence story to complete. And it just took way too long. And I was like anxious to hear his story. And I was sort of like frustrated. I was like, get it out, because he was like, I was a soldier and there was a battle. And it's like, okay, come on.
Yo, you're gonna be an impatient psychologist. Like, how are you gonna be talking to your patients being like,
No,
get it out, bitch. Spit it out. Your daddy touched you. Okay.
no, it's not like that. Obviously, like, this is a movie, so I expect the most important parts or the climax to be like hidden. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like wasn't. Though I was like, it was interesting to see his story, like before coming to here, that he was a colonial soldier and things like that. but it
Hmm.
wasn't like a insane plot twist.
It was for me. Maybe you knew because maybe you read the synopsis. I
No,
just
I didn't.
okay. All right. Well, I really felt that scene. It was moving for me. You know, obviously Monroe had PTSD from his time in the war, and he had possibly seen that the empire he was serving was doing evil, and that's what I like to see, right? Maybe I like this movie because it's a character who is, acknowledging that what the culture he comes from, the civilization he comes from, is spreading wickedness to a level untold. And maybe because I want to imagine that there are people out there who can see the evil that comes with empire, that I feel Monroe. And I really like that scene. And also what Monroe does later. Now, once again, the problem is like a lot of white people can say, yeah, I was Monroe too, or I would have been Monroe in those shoes. Like, no, you wouldn't. Stop. But I like it. I like Monroe's story.
Yeah, obviously I like his story too, and I like what he stands for. And I like the fact that you said he had PTSD because he did. Just because these terminologies came after, it doesn't mean they didn't exist before.
Hmm.
And it was also like a lot of, I would say, reason for a lot of bad things that happened during those
Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like the way it was conducted sort of took me out of it, but I appreciated the story.
Yeah. I like the way it was shot. It was moving, powerful scene. And I also like when the chief says, I killed women and children too. In battle, people die. Cause I really like, once again, how this film is like showing different mentalities and perspectives on death, war, and life. Because you would think everybody would say killing women and children is wrong. But real soldiers or people that come from warlike backgrounds might say that's just a part of life. Of course, women and children will die in war. That's the price we pay for victory. It's an interesting way of looking at it. I really like that. This film is like so brutal and real and honest on certain things. There are other times when it holds back, but there are times when it's just unflinchingly raw.
Yeah. And I think also, obviously, killing women and children is never good or is never right. But there is a difference between like how the colonial powers are killing and fighting people and how different tribes and kill each other and fight each other.
Yes, and let's
Because, yeah.
go ahead.
I mean, I was just going to say there's difference in the numbers, but then there's also difference in mentality and, goals as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So speaking of the difference in the tactics for subjugation, basically, Monroe, after he tells his sob story and cries, Charlotte gets wet and then he beats the pussy up. Uh, he wakes up, hears Charlotte's story in full detail about how she got to New Zealand while he's looking at the scars she got on her back from her time as a BDSM mistress. And, basically, one of the cliffhangers for this film that sort of never resolved is Charlotte had a daughter with one of the indigenous people, like her husband, who brought her into the tribe, right? But we never know what happened to her daughter. Am I right or am I wrong?
You're right because she doesn't say it looks like there is a lot of trauma around it and she sort of cries and, uh, looks very, very sad and she holds on to her necklace that was her daughter's,
Hmm.
but then we never know. And I just assumed that she died.
I guess so. I just wish they explained it, right? But one of the that's the only complaint I have about this film. Like, what the hell happened to her daughter? I was expecting Rangi Mai to turn out to be her daughter. I thought that's where it was going to go.
Yeah, a little bit me too, but I feel like that would have been just too like insane and too complicated because she was married to the brother of the chief.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Rangi Mai was the daughter of the chief, so there would have been like infidelity there.
Infidelity, incest, just too many overlapping coincidences and incestuousness going on. By the way, shout out to Avery Adams in the listening section. And yeah, if you've seen this movie, anybody can jump into our movie reviews. But moving on to the next part. Basically, Monroe finds out, Charlotte's full story after he beats the pussy up. He goes outside and he sees, oh shit, the captain who brought me to New Zealand is here. And he says, Kedgley, what's up? And Kedgley's like, good day, mate. And they shake hands like good white men. And Monroe's like, what you doing here? And Kedgley's like, I'm doing a transaction. I'm selling guns. You're doing what? Kedgley is selling guns to the natives. So this is how all the rifles are getting to the island, right? And so Kedgley goes up to the chief and shows the box and says, we got plenty more where that came from. And Monroe is like standing to the side like, what the hell is happening here? And Kedgley is trying to overcharge them. Like he said, I need 600 pounds of tomatoes and 33 virgins. And, and the chief was like, last time it was only 31 virgins. And he said inflation, right? But Monroe jumps in and says, you guys should not be buying these weapons. They're trying to make you kill yourselves. If you want peace, you have to make peace with Akatawada, because the more guns that are here, the more you guys will fight, and you'll eventually be wiped off, and this will be the white man's land, is essentially what Monroe is saying. And Kedgley is sort of like sitting there on the side. And I didn't like that. That doesn't make any sense. Like imagine I'm trying to do a transaction where I'm selling something and then you come into the side and say, hey, don't buy what Simon's selling. He's trying to scam you. If you keep on buying what he's selling you, you'll eventually die or your family will perish. I'll be like, bitch, shut up. Let me sell these cigarettes. Let me sell this cocaine.
I mean, I think the captain was like, I think the captain liked Monroe, but he's not following what he's doing. Like he's not gonna be the fair man who doesn't kill. He's not gonna be the fair man who doesn't want to sell guns.
Yeah.
He's just gonna do like his thing, but he likes Monroe, I think. And yeah, maybe he knew that they would have bought it either way.
Yeah, it just didn't make any sense to me, especially what happens later, because the chief tells Monroe, okay, if you want us, to, not buy these guns, you have to go to Akatawada as my emissary to make peace. And if you can convert him to your god of peace, then I won't buy these weapons and we'll be friends. We'll all be one big happy Maori family. And Kedgley says, okay, and leaves with Monroe. It didn't make any sense to me. Like that was a major plot hole. Like why would Kedgley do that? You're saying because he liked Monroe. I'm just thinking he just is like, well, I guess I really do have too many potatoes. I can chill out.
No, Monroe was the spokesman for peace. And then Kedgley was just taking him. And
Yeah,
also
but it
was
doesn't
there
make
to sell
sense. Why would
guns.
you? He's taking Monroe to go to the other chief to tell him not to buy the guns when Kedgley is trying to sell the guns.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit stupid to do that. But I don't know. Like I said, maybe he knew that they were going to buy the guns eventually, because this is not the first time that they bought it.
Yeah.
They already sort of committed to this way. And they've been like shooting and trying to like be better at shooting and things like that. So maybe he already knew, because he kept on saying supply and demand.
Yeah. Yo, when I saw that scene when Monroe was telling the people, the indigenous people, like they're doing this on purpose. They're trying to make you continue to fight each other so they can wipe you out entirely. And it's like, as a black person from America, this has been a narrative that we tell ourselves all the time. The white man specifically puts guns in the hood, liquor stores in the hood, drugs in the hood, all sorts of distractions and negative things that make us kill ourselves. But I've only heard black people say this about ourselves, or other oppressed minorities say this about ourselves. I've never heard a white man acknowledge it, right? Which makes me think, deep down inside, white people know what they're doing when they continue to flood our communities with guns and drugs and all sorts of distractions, right? Like recently in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis wanted to get rid of the guns in their city. They wanted the police to arrest anybody who had a gun and stuff like that. And Memphis is one of the blackest cities in America. But the leaders of Tennessee, who are in Nashville, which is the capital, specifically told Memphis, you cannot pass this law because this infringes on civil rights of gun owners and stuff like that. And
Mm.
that makes me think like, damn, Memphis is trying to do something about the murder rate where a disproportionate number of young black men kill themselves. And the government of Tennessee is saying, no, keep the guns in the hood. And I thought that's automatically what I thought about when Monroe was like breaking down what Kedgley was trying to do.
Mm. I
So,
mean, I think obviously, of course, they know. They knew it back then, and they know it now. Because
mm,
how are you gonna not know that and then do something on this scale
yeah,
that causes people to kill each other? And you know, here you can see like colonialism or hurting people, or you know, this type of like racism doesn't only happen physically or just like outspokenly, and it also happens in this weird way where they sort of, you know, pit people against each other and
it's
then
by
use,
design. It's like a system. It's like a
yeah,
designed, it's like a matrix that you can't break out of.
yeah, and it's almost like psychological warfare.
Hmm. Yeah. But once again, big plot point that doesn't make sense. Monroe leaves with Kedgley to go to Akatawada. While on the boat, Kedgley is telling Monroe, like, I thought you were the capitalist guy. You were reading Adam Smith, but I guess you really did read your Bible and stuff like that. And Monroe's like, shut up, bitch. While they're on the boat. Anyway, they make it to Akatawada's village. Monroe sees the white horse that he exchanged for Rangamai way in the past. And Rangamai is on the boat too. She wants to go and meet with Akatawada, but Monroe is like, no, you can't go up there. That's going to cause too much trauma or too much drama. And Monroe sits down with Akatawada and he's like, you have to make peace. The white man is trying to make you destroy yourself. And Akatawada sort of like laughs at him. He thinks like Monroe secretly just wants his horse back. But Monroe is like, no, like you have to do this. Akatawada threatens to kill him, but Monroe doesn't beg for his life. And then Akatawada sort of like dismisses him and tells him to leave. And as Monroe is leaving, Unuku, the guy who was on the boat earlier at the very beginning, warns Monroe, like, run to your horse because it's about to go down. And basically, Akatawada starts launching an attack and killing, Kedgley for the guns and the weapons, and Monroe is trying to flee. And he gets attacked by one of the main big bodyguards for Akatawada, but Rangimai saves the day by grabbing the gun and shooting him. And Rangimai and Monroe flee on horseback back to her village. What did you think about any of those scenes?
I was definitely not expecting the British captains and the sailors to get shot by their own guns, which, you know, is an irony as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing like that happened often. That might have happened often because they are sort of like only protected by what they think is, you know, gonna happen. Like they think, you know, these people want more guns so they won't kill us so we can bring it to them again. But then, yeah, it wasn't the case here. And it was definitely like a shock to me. And I like the fact that, you know, the son of the chief who was on the boat before, he liked Monroe and he supported Monroe and he didn't want him to die.
Mm-hmm.
And also thank God for Rangi Mai for not listening to Monroe as well. And
Yeah.
like the chief of Akatarawe, it's like the bad tribe, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because he is just like bloodthirsty and he wants to like invade every other tribe and have his tribe rule the land, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like he's just like this arrogant guy who doesn't really take Monroe's words seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did not expect Kedgley to die. Once again, like in this film, it's very Game of Thrones-ish. Like there's a character you see, and then boom, he's gone, got his chest blown out. I like also how in this movie there are so many great action scenes, and I think it keeps the pace of the movie up. I know you disagree, but I feel like every 20 minutes or so, there's a big action scene that breaks up the slowness of the drama and the dialogue and stuff like that. So I really like, that scene when, Monroe has to fight the the tribe leader who is trying to get him from getting on the horse. I like all the fights and everything that I see here. And I also thought it was cool that the natives sort of like took over the white man's boat. Like they just basically get on there and start slaughtering the people, and they start chanting and screaming and sticking their tongues out and rolling their eyes back. It was hella cool. I really like how in this film the natives sort of have power and autonomy over the white people that are on screen a lot of the times. You know, it's very different than what we've seen before, where it's the
Yeah.
opposite.
For me, I saw this movie and the genre was action and drama.
Hmm.
So honestly, I thought there would be more action, and there was more action towards the end and
Hmm.
not really like the beginning. Like the first hour of the movie, there's not that much violence.
Hmm.
Or action. And yes, when there was those action scenes, it was good. Those scenes were good. But I was just like expecting more to keep me like more engaged and, on my toes a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was like a disappointing part for me, that it was like 90% drama and 10% action.
Yeah, but the ending of the film really makes up for it. And shout out to Women Slayer. Horrible name, but cool guy. Your movie is up next for tomorrow. But shout out to you for joining in, and leave any comments or anything you got to say in the chat, or you can turn on the mic. But I feel like the ending is so action packed, it makes up for it. It's a strong climax.
Okay. And also one more thing. When they invaded the boat, like the son of the chief of Akatarawe, he was learning how to sail. So I was like,
Mm.
oh, was this his plan? Like from the beginning to send his son to learn how to sail and then invade the ship, kill
Yeah.
the guys and take the ship.
Yeah.
Because like they couldn't build the ship themselves in that like big ship.
Yeah, it was
So
hella. It went full circle. Like everything we saw on screen came really full circle. Like Uneku was hanging out with the white folks so long, he learned how to pilot the ship, and he's a part of the team that takes over the white man's ship to then kill more Maori people.
yeah, it's like it's an insane plot, but I was also thinking like, yeah,
Yeah,
if white people like can plot and do like dirty stuff behind natives' backs, natives
yeah,
can do the same thing.
yeah,
But it
yeah,
also costs other natives' lives. So it's like a lose-lose situation.
yeah, yeah. But anyway, so Monroe and Rangimai, they make it back to the village and they try to warn the chiefs, like, you gotta listen, we fucked up the mission. We sort of pissed off Akatawada, and now he's coming on a big boat with all of his soldiers to like kill you all. And so the chief is like, y'all gotta leave. Y'all better get out of here. But then one of the other chiefs is like, you know what? You guys can stay. And they sort of let Charlotte and Monroe into the tribe officially. And, so that's cool. And so everybody in the village is sort of like preparing for this big raid that, Akatawara's tribe is going to do. And they're digging trenches, preparing the forts, all that sort of stuff. And then Akatawara's like boat pulls up on shore and starts firing cannons at the village, right? And some people get hit. And this is something I thought I would never see. I would never see like this Native American war on screen. And it's like they're using a little bit of the white man's technology with cannons and guns, but then they also got their spears and their blades and their clubs. And there's this hella cool scene when Akatawara's tribe lands on the beach and they all do this like unison dance together. And they're sticking out their tongue, rolling their eyes back, screaming and shouting and dancing. It was hella cool. What did you think about all that lead up to the battle?
Like you said, it was definitely a very interesting scene.
Hmm.
But just taking it back when, Monroe said, we will stay and we will fight. And then like he held Charlotte's hands and they were like requesting to, join the war. And then the face Charlotte had then made me think like, I don't want to be in this war. Like, bitch, why are you dragging me into it? And I just felt like she sort of like got dragged into the war. But like obviously, yes, she was a, ex Maori convert. And yeah, and then if we think about it, it really wasn't like Monroe converting the natives to Christianity, but it was like him being converted to Maori. Uh,
Oh wow, yeah, great way of looking at this. He didn't change them to his culture; he became their culture, right?
Yeah, yeah. And definitely I agree with you, like all the chanting and the songs and they have rifles, but they also have like spears and all of that was very cool to see. Yeah, very, very cool.
Yeah, it's like Braveheart meets Apocalypto,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's man. So basically, there's like this big, huge battle where Akatora's tribe is like raiding the village of Rangimai's people, and they're jumping over trenches, shooting guns, fighting with spears, sticks, swords, everything like that. And Akatawara is in the back, sort of leading his tribe, and Rangimai's father is like standing in the back and leading his people too. And they do this tactic where they light up smoke, and there's smoke all around, and it's hard for Akatawara to see what's happening on the battlefield, but Rangimari's people can see what's happening because they're in it. Meanwhile, also at the same time, uh, Monroe has a gun, and Charlotte is loading the gun after he shoots it because it's one of those old pistols, right? One shot pistols. And so Monroe is shooting, he's shooting, but then Charlotte eventually gets shot. And then Monroe then goes out on the battlefield himself and starts like slapping the indigenous people and killing them and stuff like that. And Rangi Maya is out there too handling business. Eventually though, they win the battle. They win the battle. Rangi Maya's people, over all odds, win. And Akatawara then walks to the shore and lays down and, and he's like, I deserve death for what happened. And so Rangimai's father, puts his forehead to Akatawara's forehead and then says, yeah, you do deserve death, bitch. And he fucking kills him. Slaughters him.
I was not
Slaughters him.
expecting that.
Yes. I thought he was going to be like, peace, brother. He said, no, fuck you.
Well,
Murked him.
at the same time, I was thinking like you can't have two chiefs in one, tribe. One has to go because he might try to take over his chiefdom.
Yeah. Yeah, Akatawara had to die. Even though the Maori should unite to fight against the white people that are taking over all of the island, right? He had to die because he sort of represented that old way of thinking, like mine, power, 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 right? When the Maori need to be unified.
Yeah.
So, any comments on the last battle?
I secretly think like what was their name? Mai Nui won because of Monroe.
Mm-hmm.
Because he gave them all the tactics. Like he taught them how to load the gun faster by just
Mm-hmm.
like hitting it on the ground. And he
Mm-hmm.
also told that story. It was foggy. I didn't see who I was killing. And then
Mm-hmm.
like they made the fog.
Yeah.
So it's like, was that all his tactics that make them like, won the war?
Yeah.
Because at the first when the chief was making his war speech, he said we might be like low in number, but we can do this and all sorts of things. We know they were at a disadvantage actually,
Yeah.
but they were able to win. But yeah, it was definitely very cool to see like all the chaos.
Yeah, definitely. Hella cool battle. And so after Akatawara gets killed, Uneku is also laying down on the beach as well, next to his father. His father just got killed right in front of him, and so he's expecting to die too. Rangimai, though, walks up and next to Uneku, and like before her father can like kill him, she sort of like, puts her hand out, and her father says, we will have peace now, we will unite. And he marries his daughter to Akatawara's son, Unaku, right? And the elder person says like something in Maori language to marry them together. And that I did not expect. And boy, what a traumatic wedding. That is a wedding you will never forget. So how did you meet? Well, his tribe tried to kill my tribe. My dad killed his dad, and then we got married right on the beach. It was a wonderful wedding. It was a small get together.
I mean, I think though, like in the older times, especially in like very traditional tribes like this, who
Yeah.
sort of live in nature, everything goes hand in hand. Like
Literally
death,
hand in hand, dead hand
yeah,
in hand.
death and celebration and birth and marriage. and, lost, like, this guy just lost his father but gained a wife.
I know, that's crazy. My daddy died, but I got a bad bitch. Same day.
Yeah, like, it just goes hand in hand. It goes to show, like, how, I don't know, that's like what they're used to,
Mm-hmm.
I guess. And I definitely did not see the marriage coming to. I thought he was just gonna, like, forgive him and
Mm-hmm.
then, like, accept him to his tribe. I didn't expect, like, freaking Tangi Mai to step up and be like, I will have sex with him, daddy. Yeah.
You will fuck my daughter to bring peace to this world.
Wow.
That's essentially what her dad did. That was crazy. That was crazy. Big plot twist, very unique. This film does so many unique things in the story that it tells, and it makes it all make sense. It's not like, because with this world that you create and with this culture, you can have this actually happen, and we believe it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you told me, like, yeah, we had a nice wedding on the beach, my dead father was there, he was in attendance, front row. Like, it's crazy. But anyway, Monroe, is like, damn, I guess I'm a part of the tribe now. And so 4 years later, Monroe shows up with Rangi Mai, Uneku, and their child. I think they had a child or something, right? And he shows up to Epworth, the village that he was supposed to be with, and he's meeting with the British soldiers from the Empire. Like, they had just came from Britain to New Zealand to say, listen, the rules have changed now, but we're going to take over this land here, and we're not going to pay rent anymore to the natives. And you know, Monroe says, the fuck you ain't. Yes, you is. And basically Uneku is like the leader of the tribe, and he's like, we will talk about this later, but as of right now, you cannot build a port here and stuff like that. And Monroe is with them, and he leaves with them, but the white guys who came from Britain say to Monroe, like, what happened to you, man? What is that on your face? And we see that Monroe now has tattoos like the Maori, and he talks to them in Maori and says, this is my language, this is my home, this is my people, essentially. And Uneku, Rangimai, Monroe, they go and talk to the young girl who's holding a baby who was messing with the young indigenous boy who got killed earlier by the people of Epworth. So I think that baby she was holding was actually the son or daughter of that young boy who got killed. But that's the end of the movie. Then the last thing we see is like the British flag flying under the indigenous native Maori flag. Any comments on that?
Okay, so yeah, I like the ending, right? It was cool. It's sort of like, Monroe became their advisor and their capitalist guy.
Hmm.
And, I don't know if that baby was from, the younger guy that got killed, because I think she was sitting down with another native. So I
Mm.
think she got another native.
Okay, she got a
But
thing.
yeah, and it sort of like made me think maybe also the village sort of integrated with the tribes as well.
Oh, hell no.
No, you don't think so?
No.
Because also like the tribe leaders, the husband and wife,
Yeah.
like the guy, he was wearing like a suit, but then on top of it, he was wearing the traditional, blanket.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like a mixture of both.
I just can't see that the people of Epworth learned the error of their ways and started like adopting Maori culture and language, and let their daughters like marry Maori boys. I just can't see it. I feel
May-
like, go ahead.
Maybe that's unrealistic, but they showed like the flag too. The flag was over the English flag.
Right. Well, I think that might have been a fantasy. I think there's a little bit of this film that's fantasy, wishing that there was more autonomy for the natives. Like the natives found a way to, you know, stand up to the British, maintain their sovereignty and dominance over the land. And that's what the flag at the end is supposed to be like. Like this film, by looking at the past, is supposed to give pride and strength to the Maori people, or the people who identify with indigenous cultures around the world. But yeah, I just don't see it being real. I feel like there's a little bit of reality bending in that section.
Yeah, maybe it's like a hopeful fantasy ending a little bit, but that
Yeah.
was just like what I picked up from it,
Hmm.
basically. But yeah, Monroe continuing to be even more badass than before. Now he got tattoos on his face and he's speaking the language and stuff like that. So yeah, it was cool. Like it was a good ending.
I just wish they did a close up on the tattoos because it's hard to see them because he has a beard.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, yeah, I liked the movie
Yeah,
overall.
overall. So it's crazy because now you say you like it, but earlier when we finished watching it, you were like, "Oh, that sucked."
Now, I mean, I still have my good old problems with it. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna deny that, but I do appreciate like talking about it does bring more, you know, um, good views about the movie.
yeah. I give this a 9, and I would watch it again, and I highly recommend people watch it, especially if you haven't seen a New Zealand film before. I feel like this is like a good primer for people to like get interested in New Zealand Kiwi cinema.
Mm. Okay, well, I'll give this a 6. Because I do still have my issues with it. I really like the whole approach to it and I like the story, but I just thought that the execution like made it hard for me to watch it.
Hmm.
And I just wish that it was more compact in terms of like pacing, and also more action filled, even like, at the beginning and in the middle as well, because for me it was only action towards the end. And
Yeah.
that's when I was truly drawn to the movie. And
Hmm.
then in the beginning it just felt like a very, slow paced, sort of draggy movie. But I
Hmm.
do appreciate like, all the culture that they presented and the ideas like at that time. So yeah, that's why I give it a 6.
I see. I got you. I got you. I guess pace makes a big difference. Wasn't boring for me, and I was drunk as hell watching this movie. So I was up. Didn't feel sleepy, man, one time. But yeah, this has been our review for The Convert. Shout out to Women Slayer. Shout out to Avery Adams. Shout out to everybody who's going to be tuning in and listening to this. Let us know what y'all think about this. And if you have any films that you want us to review, put them in the chat and let us know. Y'all be easy out there. Peace.